Republicans in Congress coming to terms with the limits of what they can and can't accomplish. The president moving forward with his agenda on his own. Is this becoming the new normal for American politics? Well, at the table to discuss all of this, we have Kate Nocera. She's a Capitol Hill reporter for BuzzFeed.com. MSNBC contributor Patrick Murphy getting a head start on the pastries there. A former Democratic congressman from Pennsylvania. John Fugelsang, a political comedian and liberal commentator. And Congressman from New York, Democrat Hakeem Jeffries. And Congressman, I'll start with you because the president here is being very proactive right now in reminding people what he is able to do to work around Congress, is really trying to counter the idea that Washington is just gridlocked and nothing is possible. But I wonder, as a member of Congress, how does that make you feel that I'm sure there's a lot on your agenda that you share with the president, but you're dealing with a Republican majority in the House that has nothing in common with you ideologically. So how does it make you feel that it's up to the president now to try to make these initiatives happen?
Well, I think there's two realities that we confront. First, there's gridlock, and then there's republicanism gone wild. So gridlock is just, the reality of divided government, and it'll make things such as increasing the minimum wage, comprehensive immigration reform difficult to accomplish. But that's not inconsistent with anything that we've seen throughout sort of time here in America when you have a divided government situation. Republicanism gone wild is a very different phenomenon. It brought us sequestration, notwithstanding the fact that independent economists said it will cost the economy 750,000 jobs. It brought us a government shutdown, notwithstanding the fact that that resulted in $24 billion in lost economic productivity. It's brought us the failure to renew unemployment compensation largely for the long-term unemployed, notwithstanding the fact that independent economists say it'll cost us 200,000 jobs if it lasts throughout the year. So we've seen affirmative things done by this Republican House to hurt the American economy. Fortunately, in terms of that aspect of what we've been dealing with the debt ceiling increase recently brought to bear, perhaps we've gone beyond that moment. And then we just have to confront whether we'll be able to deal with some of these big picture issues, which will result in having to put pressure from the American people on Congress to act, or else they'll have to face the electoral consequences.
Well, that last point there, though, or else they'll have to face the electoral consequences, that's what I wonder about, Patrick, because if you're Republicans, if you're the Republican leadership in the House, for instance, and you're looking at, you're looking at the sequester, you're looking at all the 2011, you're looking at the failure to do anything on immigration, all of the things that Democrats charge Republicans with standing in the way of never offering an alternative to health care despite having, 622 votes to repeal it at this point. The electoral consequence so far that we can see is the Republican candidate for president can't win. President Obama was able to get reelected by 5 million votes. Democrats were able to, with the assist of some very flawed candidates, do well in the Senate races last year. But there was no breaking through that majority for the Republicans in the House. And as long as Republicans have that toehold, have control over the House, it really severely impedes what is possible for a Democratic administration.
Right, and let's give the leadership, the House Democrat leadership, they did pick up seats the last presidential year. But I will say, Steve, it comes down to this: self-preservation. They are so worried about the Tea Party and getting primaried, and now with redistricting on top of that, they don't want to do anything. They don't want to go out on them. They don't want to put the country first. So that's why you have issues, Steve, like immigration, which should be a win-win for Republicans. One, as far as a policy ground, it will, within the first 20 years, knock off $1 trillion to the national debt by growing our economy, $1 trillion. And two, it is politically backed by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It's their #1 priority, which is the major funder of Republicans. With a policy and a political win, they still won't do it. Why? Because they are so worried about the Tea Party.
Yeah.
But I also think that you talk about gerrymandered districts. I mean, their constituents they're doing exactly what their constituents want them to do, especially in the House of Representatives. I mean, Representative Jeffries is doing what his constituents in a liberal district want him to do. And if you look at someone like Raul Labrador in a very conservative district, he's doing exactly what they want him to do.
Can I just real quick? That's what's wrong, though, because then we should just have robots and all. You're there
wrong,
to represent.
but that's the situation.
You're supposed to be there as a U.S. member of Congress to represent the best interests of the country and your constituents.
The people you represent, who
the people but sometimes, as Abraham Lincoln said, leadership is not doing what people want you to do. It's leading them where they ought to be. And we should lead the people of America on immigration reform, on infrastructure. And these things won't happen because they're afraid of their own shadow. And that's why the approval ratings are in the tank, and they'll stay that way.
But it's true, though. But
they don't care about leadership. They care about keeping their jobs.
Right. Their approval ratings in their districts, though, don't seem to go down. And the way the thing is, as we talk about the presidential election, and we have the Electoral College, which we can, so it's not exactly most votes wins, except in 2000. Though that's basically what happens. But when you look at the House, increasingly there's this story of how the Democratic base is more and more concentrated in metropolitan areas. So you have a lot of Democratic districts where the Democratic candidate wins with 80% of the vote or something like that. The Republican vote is actually spread out a little bit more. So there are more districts that are Republican-friendly. The Republican will only get 60% instead of the 80% the Democrat gets. But that adds up to, I wouldn't say a permanent Republican majority, but a Republican majority that's very hard for Democrats to break through, even when Republicans are on the wrong side of these issues from a national polling standpoint.
Well, you can't gerrymander yourself into a better place in the history books. And it's an honor being on a panel with these folks. I feel like Ringo. I'm just glad to be here. But the fact is, blaming Obama for the slowness of the recovery is like John Wilkes Booth blaming Lincoln for missing the end of the play. It's not going to hurt a lot of Southern congressmen to oppose any kind of immigration reform. You can't win the White House with at least, is it 70% of the Latino vote? However, if you're in a district down south, you don't necessarily care about winning the White House. You care about keeping your job. So killing immigration reform, as popular though it might be, is going to help you. It's not leadership. It's keeping your job long enough until that lobbyist job offer comes in.
Well, there was some news this week, actually some news late this week about President Obama and this year's budget and a concession he was willing to make last year, a concession he's been willing to make for a few years that he no longer is. Talk about that concession and what that says about the future of his presidency. We'll pick that up when we come back.